Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Key Levers to Enable a Positive Safety Experience. My name is Christina, and on behalf of myosh, I'm so excited to explore how to move beyond compliance-driven safety and create a positive safety culture with you all. Today, I am joined by Jamie Mallinder, a Principal Consultant with Sentis. Jamie will share insights on what the top performing 14% of organisations do differently and how you can apply those same strategies. In today's session, you'll learn 8 key levers to building a positive safety culture, how to shift motivations, align data with your vision, and create lasting change through positive reinforcement. Now, we encourage you all to engage with us as much as possible throughout the session, so please feel free to use the Q&A box or the chat box, ask questions, share your thoughts, and I will throw to Jamie throughout to answer anything that pops up. And after the presentation, we can throw to them then as well. So keep them coming throughout. Again, stay engaged. Think about how you can apply these concepts to your organisation. Your participation is so key, so don't hesitate to share any thoughts or questions. Now, I will stop yapping and hand over to Jamie. So if everyone could please join me in welcoming Jamie and Mallinder, over to you.
Excellent. Thank you, Christina. And hello and welcome, everyone. I'm really excited to have you all here today as we explore some really important topics around safety. Before we do dive in, it's worth noting that we're coming together at a time when safety is in the spotlight across Australia. It is National Safe Work Month, and while today's webinar isn't directly part of that or related to it, it's a good reminder of the broader commitment that we all share in creating safe and healthy workplaces. So today we're going to focus on the key levers to enable a positive safety experience, which is all about taking practical steps towards building a safer and more engaged workforce. I'm confident that by the end of the session, you'll walk away with a few fresh insights and maybe some tools that you can take back into your workplace to try and make a real difference. Before we do, let's get started. And before we get into it and begin, I'd just like to take a moment to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we all meet today, including the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, from where I'm joining you. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here with us today. At Sentis, we deeply value the rich history, culture and knowledge of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, and it's important for us to recognise and honour that in the work we do. In terms of our own commitment at Sentis, we actually divert a portion of our profits into land preservation and conservation projects in the Pilar Valley in New South Wales. So we're proud to have invested over $2.2 million in purchasing, restoring and managing 465 hectares of land in a sanctuary that's really dedicated to preserving our natural heritage while creating a positive impact on the environment and our local communities. I am Jamie Mallinder, so I'm a Principal Consultant here at Sentis with close to 20 years worth of experience in workplace health and safety, as well as mental health and a bit of a focus on leadership and well-being. I'm pretty well known for my approach, which is quantum safety principles. So you might find me talking around about that. I've got a few notable presentations coming up, so feel free to connect with me after this and look forward to getting to know you all. Before we do jump into the core content, I'd just like to take a moment to share a little bit about Sentis and who we are for those of you who may not be familiar with us. We've been around for close to 22 years, focusing on applied psychology and neuroscience, and applying those to improve workplace safety for both organizations and individuals. Our mission is really simple. It's to change the lives for the better every single day. And we take great pride in the work we do, and we hope that the insights we share today will not only help you improve your life, but also positively impact some of the lives of the people you lead or work with. So to set the scene quickly, let's just take a quick look at where we stand when it comes to workplace health and safety in Australia. According to Safe Work Australia's latest key work health and safety statistics in Australia, we've made some real progress, but there's still some significant challenges ahead. In 2023, 200 workers lost their lives due to workplace injuries, which is slightly above the 5-year average. And the majority of these fatalities were caused by vehicle accidents and falls from heights. In fact, the number of deaths from falls actually increased by 71% compared to that previous year. So we can see some increases, and it's quite a somber time to be reflecting on these. We also can't ignore the rise in mental health claims, which now make up 11% of all serious workers' compensation claims. And the time off for mental health related issues is over 5 times higher than that of physical injuries. That really highlights the need for a more holistic approach to safety. And what does that tell us? Well, it tells us that we've come a long way, but the data shows us that there's still a lot of work to be done, especially when it comes to building a safe culture that addresses the physical, psychological, and social aspects of safety. Historically, psychology emerged from what we know as the disease model, and its focus was primarily on mental illness, disease, and dysfunction, aiming to diagnose and treat some of those issues. The goal of this was to reduce dysfunction and restore individuals back to a baseline level of normal functioning. This approach largely emphasized the negatives of the human psyche and what goes wrong rather than what goes right. If we look at psychology and the paradigm shift over the last in the late 20th century, there was really a significant shift towards something that we now know as positive safety. And that was led by some pioneers in the market, Martin Seligman of one. And this movement really expanded on psychology's focus from merely treating illness to understanding what makes life worth living. Rather than focusing solely on dysfunction, positive psychology explored the conditions that led to human flourishing, such as resilience, happiness, and also optimal functioning. So it looked beyond simply reducing symptoms to harnessing strengths and other factors that help individuals and communities thrive. A good way to think of this is like the difference between maintaining a garden and growing one. So traditional psychology is like pulling the weeds out. It really focuses on removing what's going wrong. Whereas positive psychology, on the other hand, is all about planting seeds, watering, and nurturing the environment so that people like plants can grow and thrive beyond just survival.
It's so funny you mentioned that. I just remembered on the weekend, my garden was literally overgrown, and I looked at it, and I must have been at a heightened point of my day, and I literally just pulled everything out and started fresh. And that is exactly what I do when I'm having, like, when I get to my peak levels of stress. I'm like, stop, break, refresh, start again. And so
Yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
all old school when it comes to psychology, according to that analogy.
Well,
I was like, oh, this is ringing true.
well, I got you. That's a good analogy. Oh dear. Obviously, the evolution of safety, if you've closely followed it, it really closely mirrors that transformation that we've seen in psychology as well. So, historically, traditional safety approaches have been really reactive, focusing on compliance and aimed at eliminating negatives, so removing hazards or incidents or injuries or violations. And much like the disease model in psychology, these safety measures often sought to control or minimize risks, often through a command and control approach, with human error often viewed as that primary cause of failures. So often what you do see is a blame response within the industry. And the goal was to achieve an absence of harm typically measured by lagging indicators like lost time injuries or accident rates. And much like how traditional psychology was measured, they were measuring success by the absence of symptoms. Similarly, in safety, we have historically measured success by the absence of injuries, rather than the presence of safety. So that kind of brings us to positive safety, which is something that positive safety is an approach and principle that we use here at Sentis. So positive safety, like positive psychology, represents a paradigm shift in the way that we view safety and the way that we do safety. So we're moving beyond just preventing harm, which is, of course, that remains a crucial aspect of safety. But the goal is really to create environments where safety is deeply embedded within the organizational culture. In today's world, safety is a holistic experience and encompasses not just physical safety, but also psychosocial safety, which I'm sure a lot of you are grappling with at the moment, as well as the social safety aspect in the environment. So it's really about ensuring every aspect of an individual's well-being is considered and managed. This shift in focus really emphasizes the presence of safety, not just that absence of incidents that we've been talking about. So by adopting this approach, we're far more likely to achieve autonomous motivation. And that's where people aren't just following safety protocols or processes because they're required to, but because they genuinely understand and value the importance of safety. They're investing.
Almost.
Absolutely, yeah. So they're choosing and making a choice to invest in safety, not because they have to, but because they want to.
Yeah, not just ticking a box.
Absolutely. And as a result, when this happens, we don't just achieve compliance, but we foster a culture where people actively contribute, share ideas, and take ownership of safety. So if we're to summarize what positive safety is all about, it can all be boiled down to this. Positive safety is proactive and not just reactive. Rather than merely focusing on minimizing negatives, if accidents, like accidents or incidents, positive safety really seeks out the positives. It's about learning from what's working, not just fixing what's broken in the background. The second is that safety is an enabler. It doesn't just ensure compliance; it actively contributes to building a positive organizational culture. Like you said, Christina, it's not just a box to check off. It has the potential to enhance the overall culture of an organization. And when we talk about safety, it's really important to remember that it's not just physical safety, it's also about the social and psychological safety. So all these dimensions are connected and interrelated, and each influence one another. So when we adopt this holistic approach, safety becomes a driver of motivation and discretionary effort. So people start to invest in safety because they want to, not because they have to. And that's really the ultimate goal. Now, while many people in the industry understand the value of positive safety and are really on board with the concept, making that shift from traditional compliance-driven safety to the positive, proactive approach is often easier said than done. We frequently find ourselves discussing human and organizational performance, for example, or HOP, and other frameworks that really emphasize positive safety, but there's still some resistance to fully adopting these approaches. Even though it makes a lot of sense, that transition remains a challenge in practice for a lot of organizations.
Change is scary. And I think a lot of people, when it comes to this sort of thing, a lot of CEOs, or, well, I'm generalizing here, but are very much stuck in the safety and mental health and things like that, are more a HR pillar than a pillar on its own, which is needed across the whole company. It's not necessarily something that's just in one instance, is it? Like, it needs to be driven throughout.
Absolutely.
And like you said, rather than it being a reactive situation. Positive safety is making it proactive and fixing the issues before they even occur.
Absolutely. And I think there's often a bit of a misunderstanding of how interconnected our workplaces are,
Definitely.
and how a small change somewhere can make a very big difference elsewhere within the organization, for the positive or the negative. So
Definitely.
excellent. So this is really where this topic can get really interesting. Or personally, I find it interesting at this part, and that's to get that transformation in a safety culture. It is really important for us to understand and unpack what's going on in people's brains and what drives certain types of behavior to repeat over and over again in safety culture. So, what we do know from neuroscience is that our brains register social and physical threats in very similar ways, whether it's a physical threat like a near miss on site, or a social threat like feeling singled out for criticism. Our brains interpret and react to both in a very comparable manner. The same goes for rewards. So our brains respond to both physical rewards, like getting a bonus, or getting a pat on the back for meeting safety targets, and the social rewards, like praise from a supervisor. They both respond to these in very similar ways. However, there is a catch to this. So it's actually easier to trigger the threat response in our brains than it is to activate a reward response. That's why when we try to motivate people around safety, we often end up falling into the threat bucket and creating a fear-based culture where safety feels more like a stick than a carrot. This obviously isn't an ideal motivator. It's like running a car on a low-grade fuel. It'll get you moving, but it won't perform at its best, and it may degrade or damage other aspects of the engine over time. On the other hand, a rewards-based motivation is like filling your car with high-octane fuel. It creates better behaviors, more momentum, and a higher quality performance. Let's touch on two key psychological principles that'll really help you to understand this dynamic. First, we have negativity bias. So this is an innate feature of any human brain, and it leads us to focus more on negative events, behaviors, and outcomes than positive ones. From an evolutionary perspective, this bias helped us stay alert to danger, both physically and socially. But in the context of safety, this can often backfire. So you'd think that our brains are wired to look out for danger, and we'd naturally be more attuned to risks in our work environment. But what can actually happen is that we start to view other things like social dynamics and relationships as more of a threat than some of the physical risks themselves. An example of this might be that people become more concerned about how they'll be perceived if they raise a safety issue rather than the safety risk itself. As a result of this, mistakes and failures are often overemphasized, and we often focus on what's wrong rather than what's working. Over time, this can lead to a culture of fear and blame. Employees often feel like they only hear about safety when something's going wrong. And to make matters worse, negative interactions like being reprimanded or criticized often stick with us longer than those positive ones. This leads to a disengaged workforce where people can associate safety with punishment rather than support.
It's like when you have a bad experience at a restaurant or something, you're always going to hear the bad reviews, and people are always quick to write a bad review. They're never quick to write a positive review, are they?
Absolutely. And over time, our brain can form neural pathways that lead us to avoiding situations like that.
Who wants to go through that again? No one.
Exactly. Exactly. I guess the second principle that I want to discuss with you all is the fundamental attribution error. So this occurs when we attribute someone's actions to their personality or character rather than external factors. For example, when an employee makes a mistake, we're more likely to think, oh, what were they thinking, rather than considering some of those systematic factors at play in the background. On the other hand, when we make a mistake ourselves, we're quick to point out the external reasons. I wasn't given the right tools, or I wasn't trained properly. And this creates a cycle where leaders focus on individual blame instead of looking at that bigger picture and zooming out and asking, what could we have done better to prevent this from happening? I can share a quick example around that as well from an organization that we've worked with. They had a personal risk assessment tool, something that we've all likely seen or used on a daily basis. And it's designed to help people make safer choices. But in this case, it wasn't working as intended. And employees saw it as a box ticking exercise that management used to really cover their own backs. It wasn't integrated into the overall process, so there was no meaningful training or onboarding that happened around it, and it wasn't a part of safety conversations out in the field. So when an incident occurred, the first question was always, where's your completed risk assessment? And if it wasn't filled out correctly, employees feared losing their job. So what started as a tool to enhance safety quickly became a source of cynicism, and employees were filling it in not to manage risk and protect themselves, but to protect their jobs. And this can be a prime example of how something designed to create a positive safety culture can really backfire, leading to some of those negative safety cultures instead. One that disengages workers from safety rather than really involving them in it, which is what we want to see. So some of you on the call, I'm aware, on the webinar have worked with us before, so you might recognize this slide. It reflects data gathered from over 60,000 respondents across more than 100 organizations globally. And it really highlights the key factors that we typically see in a negative safety culture. In workplaces with negative safety cultures, several common issues arise. The first is the quality of safety procedures. So people often feel that safety procedures lack value or they're too complicated to implement. Many workers perceive these procedures as serving the company's interests rather than their own. And that leads to a tick-the-box culture where compliance is really prioritized over meaningful safety practices in field. The second is management safety commitment. So a lack of consistent commitment from management, poor prioritization of safety, and weak leadership skills such as role modeling and inspiring action can contribute to the perception that leaders don't walk the talk. And this inconsistency undermines employee trust and engagement with safety protocols. This is really important from a psychological safety aspect within organizations as well. I always say that trust and confidence are really, really important within the overall context of an organizational culture. And trust is a really easy thing to gain, but it's very quickly lost. So lack of action or lack of follow through often loses that straight away. The third is the internal context. So that's factors like change management or job insecurity and low morale. They impact safety performance. So when leaders implement quick fixes or make sudden shifts without clear communication, it creates cynicism and distrust among the workers. Workers often feel like they're being subjected to knee-jerk reactions rather than thoughtful, well-planned safety initiatives. The fourth is a willingness to report incidents and errors. This is something that I've spoken about at length in my career, having worked in really complex contractor management, labor hire environments. This is a real issue within that context. So this is where a fear of punishment, a lack of feedback, or overly complicated reporting processes really deter workers from reporting incidents. And this reduces, one, the opportunity to learn from mistakes, but two, the opportunity to prevent incidents proactively and really reduce the number of issues that are occurring within a work environment.
It would be
And
such
finally,
it would be
oh,
such a hard
sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. It would be such a hard thing to shift the mindset from this, like the scarcity of the tall poppy syndrome situation, or the squeaky wheel being in the company, or the tattletale. Like it's this stigma that people have in their heads, that if they say something, they're putting their head up, they're drawing attention to themselves, and they're seen as the issue, when it's not them
Yeah.
that's the issue, it's the issue itself. And it's getting your head around that we need to change, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's often something that's really reinforced by leadership behaviors as well.
Mm,
So it is a real challenge. I think getting the foundations right and ensuring that your leaders are equipped to be able to have these conversations in a empathetic manner is a real key to that.
definitely.
And I guess finally, the fifth one is employee safety performance. So workers frequently feel that their safe behaviors go unnoticed and that the focus is really only on their mistakes. So this ties together that whole theme that we've been talking about. They might work safely 99% of the time, but only receive attention when something goes wrong. And that imbalance, particularly when it's linked solely to lag indicators like incident-free days or LTIs, that can fuel disengagement and frustration. And I'm sure that's something that resonates with anybody on the call today or on the webinar today. These factors all combine to create a culture where fear and blame dominate. And despite our best intentions, organizations often end up fostering a negative safety culture by accident.
Yeah.
The key takeaway around this is that shifting from a negative to a positive safety culture requires deliberate and conscious effort. Organizations need clear frameworks and processes to support the transformation. And one of the most critical aspects to address motivation behind safety behaviors, how we can drive better quality motivation to produce different outcomes, is really important. So that's probably a question I would have you ask yourself. How can I drive better quality motivation to produce different outcomes in the organization I work in? As we're unfolding and unpacking that, it's also really important to understand what drives the motivation of your people when it comes to safety. There's a spectrum of motivators ranging from low quality external pressures to high quality intrinsic motivation. And we're going to unpack that in this slide. So at the lowest end, we have no motivation, and that's people simply don't care about safety or don't see the point in engaging in it. They might skip wearing safety gloves or safety glasses because they don't understand the value or see the relevance for the task at hand.
I'm sure you would
I
find the people that are on that end of the scale, or that end of the spectrum, have never had anything bad happen to them.
Absolutely, yeah, I couldn't agree more. And knock on wood, hopefully nobody on the webinar today is in that position within their environment.
Yes, absolutely, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's right. Like, I feel like just because you haven't had anything happen to you, again, it goes into that proactive reactive situation. It's like, if you haven't had anything happen to you, that's amazing. Let's stay on that trajectory and make sure nothing happens. Let's be proactive about it. Don't just think that because, like, if nothing changes, nothing changes. It's like it needs to be addressed regardless of whether you've had something happen or not.
Absolutely, and it can foster complacency towards
Exactly. And that's a
tasks and safety overall.
silent killer.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more. And moving up, we really encounter external pressure. So that's where people comply with safety rules because they have to. They want to avoid negative consequences from that, obviously like losing your job or being reprimanded. Or they want to gain something like recognition for following rules, and this is what we call avoidance motivation, and that's where the goal is to avoid punishment rather than actively engaging in safety behaviors. Then we have internal pressure, so that's where someone might not really want to comply with safety rules, but they do it because they feel like they have to. Perhaps that could be to avoid feelings of guilt or embarrassment in their work group, or um, other examples. So it reminds me that motivating my own children around their homework, that's probably a great example that I could use. One child will do it to avoid embarrassment in front of the teacher, while the other requires external pressure from me to complete the task. So that's very, very much the case in my home. And in this case, it's not about it's really about internal obligation rather than a genuine engagement in the task at hand. And as we move into the higher end of the motivation spectrum, we find that find something that we call autonomous motivation. Here, individuals are engaging in safety because they genuinely believe it's important, and they choose to follow safety procedures because they want to go home safe. They want to spend time with their family and engage in those activities and things that they love. This is where our PB5 concept comes into play. So people make personal choices to be safe for the sake of their own well-being and that of their loved ones. Even higher up is personal identification with safety. So in this case, people see themselves as the kind of person who prioritizes safety, and safety becomes a part of their identity and their DNA. So they believe that they are role models and that their actions influence those around them. So they engage in safe behaviors because it aligns with who they are. And then finally, at the top end of this spectrum is intrinsic motivation. So this is where people engage in safety behaviors simply because it brings them joy or satisfaction. Now, I'll be honest, not everything about safety is going to ignite intrinsic motivation in people. Yeah, probably a great example. It's getting hot over here in WA, so wearing a full PPE and your high vis in a hot confined space or in a regional area is not likely to bring any joy to anyone, and often there's a lot of discomfort that comes along with it. But when someone shares ideas to improve safety or contributes to making the workplace safer for everyone, it can bring a sense of pride and satisfaction, and this is where intrinsic motivation comes in. So looking at the spectrum, we can categorize controlled motivation, those behaviors driven by external and internal pressures, as the junk food of motivation. Yeah, it works, but only for the short term. And it's like feeding your team junk food. It'll get them through the day, but it's not sustainable, and it's not going to have good outcomes for them. You'll find yourself in a cycle of having to micromanage and check up on people constantly. To move beyond this, what we really need to do is tap into that autonomous motivation. That's where people engage in safety out of genuine care and personal investment. This is really the only way that we can get more than just compliance. We want discretionary effort where employees not only follow procedures, but they actively seek ways to improve safety for themselves and their workmates. That's where the real magic happens, and it's how we drive a culture that values safety deeply. So I guess the question is, what type of motivation is driving safety in your organization? Feel free to drop that in the chat, and I'd love to see some of the feedback coming in.
Yeah, I've written that down
But,
as well. I wrote in the chat box for everybody to answer if you can. Where do you fit on the safety motivation scale?
fantastic. Thank you, Christina.
I think it would come down to as well, like this is another reason why it's so important to understand your employees and your colleagues on a different level than just what you see in a work sense. Like what rewards them, what motivates them, what drives them, what's their why. And if you know that, you can tailor your management, you can tailor your workload, and you can tailor everything for those people in such a different way to make them all reach for the top of the scale. Like it's not a one fits all, is it? Ever?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think everyone has their own little motivations. I know I do as well. So it's really important to get to know your team personally and really understand what drives them.
Definitely. Therese has mentioned that she fits between external and internal pressures for safety.
That's excellent. Thanks, Therese, for getting involved. Excellent. So how do we make that shift into a different approach, a different style of driving safety engagement? Many of you on the call, if you don't know who Sentis are, you'll be likely familiar with our attitudes, behaviors, results model. And it's a simple concept, but it's really powerful. The model shows that our attitudes, so the way we think and feel, drive the behaviors that we engage in. And those behaviors ultimately determine the results that we get. When it comes to safety or really any organizational goal, we often focus too much on the results that we want to achieve and the behaviors needed to get there. So we start by telling people these are the behaviors that we need to see to hit our target. But when we do this without considering whether our people's attitudes really align with those behaviors, what we end up getting is superficial compliance. So you'd know the type, the people nodding their heads and saying yes to everything. But once they're out of sight, they're doing something completely different. That's because there's a lack of genuine engagement. I hit a nerve there, did I? So if we don't understand our people's attitudes and ensure those attitudes are really aligned with the behaviors we want to see, we're not going to get the real buy-in that we want. And over time, that misalignment can lead to resistance and even a blame culture. That's definitely not where we want to be. So to avoid that, we really need to step back from just focusing on behaviors and outcomes. And instead, we should ask, what are the attitudes that we want to foster? What kind of attitudes will naturally drive the right behaviors within our organization? And when we focus on shifting attitudes, we're creating a foundation where safety behaviors are genuine and not forced. This is where we move beyond compliance and towards true engagement, where people are not just doing what they're told, but they're actively committed to safety because they believe in it.
I think it comes down to as well, it's so important to let your colleagues and let your mentors and let your staff know that it's the best thing is to be transparent and to build a trust and to build a safe environment to be transparent, because there's people that are nodding their head and they're just agreeing, but then going back into their old habits and their old ways just to say, yes, I am doing it. It's such a disingenuous way of working, and it just creates such a avalanche of issues down the line, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does, and I like to call it a snowball effect, but it can really snowball up. We're on the same page.
Yeah, I was going to say tumbleweed. I'm like, that's not right.
Tumbleweed's probably more appropriate in Australia.
Yeah.
Anyway. Dear. So when we focus on the attitudes and we start fostering that autonomous motivation, this is when we really see a real shift. So people begin to take ownership and responsibility for safety, not just for their own well-being and safety, but for the safety of everybody around them. They want to see their colleagues go home safe. And that's where we start to build a more resilient safety culture. It's all about fueling autonomous motivation by shaping the right attitudes in the workforce. This shift moves us beyond simply focusing on behaviors and results, and it really prompts us to ask, how do we cultivate the attitudes that naturally lead to the right behaviors? Once this happens, we're no longer just enforcing rules, we're fostering a culture where people are genuinely committed to safety because they believe in it. As this shift starts to really take place in organizations, we can see it reflected clearly in the research. So time and time again, the data shows that when attitudes align with the positive safety practices, it leads to a stronger and more sustainable safety culture. When we examine the drivers of both negative and positive safety cultures, we uncover the valuable insights from real data. Organizations that have successfully moved beyond public compliance to more collaborative private compliance cultures share several common themes. So firstly, these organizations have a clear mission and vision around safety. Leadership sets motivating and engaging expectations driven from the top. Now, I know that might sound a little bit fluffy and soft at times, but the reality is that you only achieve what you aim for. So if your goal is just to create compliance and enforce rules, that's all you're ever going to get. However, if you set a more aspirational vision and it opens up to greater possibilities for a stronger, more engaged safety culture, that's really what you're going to get out of it. Once that clear safety vision is established, high-performing organizations focus on aligning their leadership teams to that vision. They ensure that their leaders have the skills and capabilities to lead in line with the mission. And these leaders take ownership of their role and act consistently and promote safety as part of the organization's core values. This approach has positive ripple effects, like seeing better team motivation or communication, and often you see a positive impact on production capabilities and performance overall. Not only do these types of organizations prioritize physical safety, but they also focus on having those social and psychological safety dynamics down pat as well, encouraging people to speak up and share information. And this helps to eliminate underreporting, ensuring that the right data reaches the right places within an organization. Finally, what we see that these organizations encourage more individual responsibility for safety, with far fewer pushbacks on safety initiatives and projects. And that result is that safety culture is both inclusive and resilient, one that goes beyond mere compliance and genuinely engages the workforce in meaningful ways. Interestingly, our research really closely aligns with a lot of the literature on the key drivers of positive safety culture. From this, we've developed really 8 principles of positive safety, and these are things that we use at Sentis to guide organizations in cultivating a stronger, more proactive safety culture. So for the purpose of today's session, I just want to focus on 3 core foundations of safety transformation. That is to lead with a vision, make data-based decisions, and build a strong foundation. These 3 elements are critical for making meaningful changes and driving lasting improvements in how organizations approach safety. Now, what we might do now is just dive into a real-life example that illustrates how an organization has implemented these key elements of positive safety. This one comes from an impact study that we've conducted with Unity Water. Keenan and his team at Unity Water are deeply committed to creating positive safety culture. And in this case, it really brings the concepts to life. If you'd like to see more about this case in detail, it is covered in our book, Leading Positive Safety as well, which I'm sure all of you will look into after this.
I'll pop a link
I'll hold you to that.
Yeah, I'll pop a link to where you can access that book in the email.
That'd be great. Yeah. Excellent. Thank you. When Keenan reflects on their journey, he recalls that 10 years ago, their focus was primarily on injury management and rehabilitation. That's what we call the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff approach. The goal was really to reduce their lost time injury frequency rates by managing injuries and incidents more effectively. Over time, however, they began to evolve towards a more proactive safety approach. They aim to manage and mitigate risks rather than just react to the incidents, with a strong focus on improving the physical environment. As time went on, the team at Unity Water realized that they needed to shift their thinking even further. They began asking, how can we create an environment where people not only think and act safely, but feel valued and appreciated by the organization when they're doing it? This focus shifted from just managing safety metrics to building a culture where both the organization itself and the people share a genuine interest in keeping everyone safe. This shift didn't just happen at operational level. It really started from the top with the board and executive team. They were highly collaborative and intentional about the type of safety culture that they wanted to create. When Unity Water approached us, they acknowledged that there was room for improvement and wanted to know how can we approach this change in a practical, methodical way. And we started by benchmarking their current safety culture, identifying both strengths and weaknesses. Initially, their results were a bit disappointing to them. They had something that we call a counterproductive safety culture. But that acknowledgement was the first step in making meaningful changes within their organization. When we dug into their results, it became clear that their current safety culture had several key drivers that needed addressing. And we mapped out these drivers and identified areas for improvement. These are the levers the business can use to focus on and to really shift the dial towards a positive safety culture. So we sat down with the board and executive team presenting their results. There were some clear areas for improvement in red, and they signaled significant opportunities for improvement, while these orange areas indicated they were primarily focused on compliance. So what was missing were the more advanced stages of safety culture, areas like private compliance, collaborative safety, or citizenship behaviors, which require higher quality motivation from employees. Keenan and his team, being very practical in their approach, quickly understood the need to first address the red areas. Their strategy was really clear, focusing on moving those red dots, and then in turn, focusing their attention to the yellow areas, with the goal shifting into the goal of shifting into the grey over time, representing a more integrated and collaborative safety culture. To achieve this, they set a clear vision for the business. They created a clear action plan to guide their progress. With this plan in place, they began to methodically work through the processes, steadily shifting their culture.
The fact that they came to you in the first place just shows that they're on the right path of thinking to get the ball rolling. Like, they've acknowledged
Absolutely.
internally that they need to work on this. And I think that's a huge first step a lot of us need to take.
Absolutely. And I think self-awareness and there's a fair degree of confidence in doing something like that. I think it's a big gap in
And
the industry
vulnerability as
overall.
well. Yeah.
Absolutely. To be able to stand up and say, look,
We can
maybe
improve.
we don't know everything here and we can improve.
Yep.
When we look at the results over time, this is a great little comparison. Comparing 2019 to 2022, we can see a real clear shift in their safety culture. The way they achieved this outcome was first by changing their focus and vision at the top of the organization, and that provided the foundation for success when it hit the front line. Next, they really dove into the data that was there to really identify which areas needed to shift in order to realize their vision of a culture that genuinely cares for people and encourages that discretionary effort that we're talking about. They then consulted with their workforce and gathered insights and feedback, ensuring that the vision was rooted in real concerns and opportunities from the front line. From there, they identified the key building blocks, would set their leaders and their people and their entire organization as a whole up for success. A critical part of this project and this process overall was being transparent. So they shared the results of this with their entire team, saying, look, here's where we are and here's where we want to go. And this openness invited the workforce to be a part of that journey towards creating a better and safer workforce and workplace. When we ran sessions to align both leaders and their team members with this new vision, giving them the skills and mindset shifts that they needed to bring it to life, that really cemented everything and
And the fact
helped
that
the organization.
this was all obviously happening and change happening during the height of COVID. Like, the dates, the change of COVID alone would have been a huge disruptor in their industry. And then this, to see such an improvement, I hope both the Sentis team and them are so proud, and just goes to show how important an active plan is to make changes and to make them accurately.
Absolutely, and I think it's really encouraging to see these types of results coming through.
Definitely.
I guess the next slide is really just how you'll see how they successfully shifted from that counterproductive culture to one that's really characterized by public compliance, with just a whisker away from being in that private compliance category. So this is really fantastic achievement for any organization, and we're optimistic that their upcoming survey results that we're doing at the moment is going to push them into that private compliance space. So following this progress, we worked closely with their team to assess their tangible impacts on the organization. And we looked at the traditional safety data to see the real world results of their efforts, and the outcomes have been really remarkable. As you can see here, by shifting their culture and focusing on key areas and strategic levers within the business, they were able to reduce recordable incidents by 7.5%. Although their starting point wasn't particularly high to begin with, this is still a significant improvement in metrics. They also managed to increase near-miss reporting by 7%, which is another positive step forward, but probably most impressive outcome was that a nearly 35% reduction in serious injury and fatality events, or SIFs. And this means that they were able to target and reduce those most critical incidents, really the big stuff that can seriously harm or kill people, by over a third. And they achieved this by taking a strategic approach, setting a strong vision, analyzing data, and making incremental yet really impactful changes. So I'm going to focus on those three key areas that we've unpacked in this Unity water case study. So leading with vision, making database decisions, and building a strong foundation. These areas are really essential for creating a positive safety culture. And I'll walk you through some of the reflection questions for each, which are currently featured in our Leaders Playbook section of our Leading Positive Safety book. These are designed to guide discussions from a board level right down to the frontline leaders. The first is leading with a vision. So you should ask yourself and your leadership team, do we have a clear safety strategy that resonates with everyone in the organization? How does this vision inform our decision making and cascade down to influence policies, procedures, and priorities? And are these attitudes and behaviors of our leaders, along with our policies and procedures, aligned with this vision overall? It's really important to remember that in order for people to buy into the safety vision, it has to be both inspiring and relevant. It also needs to have congruence between how we operate and the vision itself. If leaders aren't living that vision, it's really difficult for the rest of the organization to believe in it. The second is making database decisions. In reflecting on the role of data in shaping your safety culture, what you should ask yourself is, does the data that we track align with the strategic objectives and the safety outcomes that we want to achieve? Are we tracking the right metrics that drive the right attitudes and results that we want? And lastly, what is the behavioral impact of the data that we track? Does it support a culture of learning and development, or does it have unintended negative consequences? So, for example, lost time injury data, which is widely used, can sometimes create pressures to hide incidents if people feel like they're being blamed for resetting the clock to zero. So in these cases, we need to ask, is the data we're tracking helping to promote transparency and learning, or is it driving behaviors that undermine our safety culture? And lastly, building a strong foundation. So consider whether your systems and resources support a positive safety culture within your organization. Do we have the right safety systems, equipment, and resources in place to manage our critical risks? And do our leaders have the skills, capability, and capacity, that includes time and resources, to engage and motivate their teams towards that positive safety mindset? This reflection is about ensuring that we not only have the right tools, but that our leaders are equipped and empowered to drive the culture that we want to see. So I highly recommend taking these reflection questions back to your leadership teams for discussion. And these conversations can reveal significant insights that will help guide your organization towards building a more proactive and more sustained safety culture. We're at the back end. Excellent.
Yeah, before you wrap up there, Jamie, we've got an amazing question from Reese. I was thinking the same one myself. He has asked, in your opinion, what is the most important data to track and how do you manage that data tracking?
Brilliant. That's a great question.
Just joking.
Well, absolutely. Technology really helps us in this way, right? Now we have the capability of getting all these insights and raw data into systems that can help us categorize and quickly understand those. In terms of the most important data to track, I've seen a lot of organizations moving towards severity rates or severity incident rates. I think those are really important because it gives you a feel for elements that probably aren't categorized within the lost time injury rates or total recordable injury rates. So severity incidents is a really important one. Also that you're tracking the insights that you need from the front line and that they're making their way towards the top of the organization. There is a new standard that came out this year as well, ISO 45004, which really focuses on these this move and push towards proactive indicators rather than water under the bridge. So if you are looking for some more info there, Reese, that's a really great resource.
I'll add a link to that in our email as well. Thank you, Reese.
Thanks, Reese.
Your webinar's coming up. They look amazing.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I did think what we might want to do is touch on the back end of this. This is actually part of a 3-part series that we've been running. The next one has a very special guest, Jan Marchant, the General Manager of Health and Safety at Southeast Water, who is another client. And Jan will be sharing her experience in I always trip up on this word, so you've got me. Operationalizing positive safety principles within their organization. And it's shaping up to be a really great discussion. She's really passionate and takes a very practical approach to applying these concepts. So it's going to be a valuable session for anyone interested in learning how to transform theory into practice. So if you haven't registered already, we will provide some links to these.
Amazing.
Or you can scan the QR code.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you.
Sorry, go on.
Finally.
I love this. Go.
Finally, we do have our positive safety community as well. So I'm excited to introduce you to that this afternoon if you haven't seen it. It's a platform supported by Sentis where safety citizens can connect and learn and share and grow. So we'll get that link distributed as well. If you have your phone in front of you now, you can scan that link and it will take you there for registration. And finally, we have mentioned the leading positive safety book throughout. So finally, that is also a great resource. It's available from sentis.com.au. And if you attended today, we'd also like to offer you an exclusive discount code to purchase that book online. So if you use the code myosh, MYOSH 15, you will get a 15% discount off your order. So
does this make me an influencer now?
It certainly does. Welcome to the club.
Love it. Thank you so much, Jamie. I know we've gone over a little bit, but I appreciate your words of wisdom and your energy and your insights so much. I have written so many notes to ensure that we pop all those links and all those resources and discount codes in the newsletter that will pop out after today's session. Again, I have recorded this session, so we will be popping it onto our YouTube channel, our social media channel, our website, as well as a podcast. So wherever you listen to your podcast, you can catch up on this. And I know that the team at Sentis will add it onto their database as well, and their website, and all the in-between things that you can re-watch this on. Again, highly encourage everybody to join their positive safety community. It is an incredible resource, an amazing free platform. So everybody jump on there. Jamie, again, thank you so much for your time. I'm excited to look into all of this further. And if anybody has any other questions, I know Jamie's more than happy for you guys to reach out to him. And we are as well here at myosh. So that's it, I think. Again, Jamie, thank you so much. And I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of the day.
No, thank you so much. And thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
See ya. Bye.
See you later.